Kate had always considered herself a woman who noticed the small things. It was a point of quiet pride, a skill that made her excellent at her job as a curator at a small but respected history museum in Bristol. While others scanned a room, Kate's eyes would find the crooked painting, the single book on a shelf that was out of sequence, the almost invisible crack in a centuries-old vase. She could spend hours with a single artifact, letting it tell her its story through the wear on its handle or the faint watermark inside its lid. This attention to detail extended to her personal life, though sometimes she wished it didn't. She noticed when her neighbor had a new car, when her favorite barista was wearing a different brand of perfume, and when her husband of 12 years, William, seemed to be hiding behind a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. William was a good man, a quiet, steady, reliable presence in her life. He was a structural engineer, a man who dealt in load-bearing capacities and tensile strengths, a profession that suited his methodical nature. Theirs was not a marriage of fiery passion and grand gestures, but one of comfortable silences, shared tea in the morning, and a deep, abiding respect. Or so Kate had always believed. Lately, however, the silence hadn't felt comfortable. It had felt heavy. It started about 3 months ago. William became more distracted. He would come home from work, and instead of settling into his worn armchair with a technical journal, he would stand by the window, staring out at their small garden, his tea growing cold in his hand. He was forgetful, misplacing his keys, and leaving the milk out on the counter. When Kate asked if everything was all right, he would startle, as if pulled from a deep dream, and offer a too brisk, "Fine, love, just a lot on at work. Big project." Kate, being Kate, noticed. She catalogued each small anomaly, the new crease between his eyebrows, the way he'd stopped humming along to the radio in the car, the fact that he'd been sleeping in his study more often, claiming he didn't want to wake her with his tossing and turning. She accepted his explanations because she wanted to, because the alternative, that something was truly wrong, was a door she wasn't ready to open. She filled the silence with her own work, with planning their next holiday, with the comfortable rhythm of their life. She mistook the quiet for peace, not realizing it was the calm before a storm. And the discovery happened on a drizzly Tuesday afternoon. William was at work, and Kate had a rare day off. She had decided to tackle the home office, a small room that had become a catch-all for paperwork, old files, and general clutter. It was William's domain, and she usually left him to it, but she felt an urge to organize, to create order from the chaos that seemed to be creeping into their home. She started with the bookshelf, dusting and rearranging. Then she moved to the old roll-top desk in the corner, a piece they'd bought at a flea market years ago. She began sorting through the pigeonholes, finding old receipts, instruction manuals for appliances they no longer owned, and a collection of pens that had long since run out of ink. It was tedious, meditative work. As she slid her hand into one of the deeper compartments, and her fingers brushed against something that wasn't paper. It was a small, rectangular object, smooth and cool. She pulled it out. It was a mobile phone, an old basic model, the kind you could buy for cash at any supermarket. Certainly not William's. He had a sleek, work-issued smartphone that was always glued to his hand. Frowning, Kate turned the phone over in her palm. It felt foreign, a secret object in her familiar home. Curiosity, that ingrained habit of a curator, got the better of her. She pressed the power button. The screen glowed to life. It wasn't password protected. It was as if whoever owned it never expected it to be found. She should have put it down. She knew she should have put it down. The voice of reason in her head was screaming at her to leave it, to wait for William, to ask him about it directly. But the smaller, a more anxious voice, the one that had been whispering for the past 3 months, urged her on. Her thumb moved before her brain could stop it, opening the messaging app. The screen filled with a thread of texts. The most recent one, sent just 2 days prior, was at the top. Her eyes scanned the words. her heart beginning a slow, heavy thud against her ribs. It was a simple message, but it was a world of implication. I know you can't always reply, but just knowing you read these means everything. Thinking of you. Same time next week? The message was not addressed to William. The contact name at the top was a single letter. J. Kate stared at the words until they blurred. The air in the room seemed to thin. Thinking of you. Same time next week. This wasn't a wrong number. This was a lifeline to someone, and it was hidden in her husband's desk. Her hands trembled as she scrolled further back, her breath catching in her throat. The messages spanned weeks, a one-sided conversation from this unknown J to whoever held the phone. There were expressions of longing, updates on a mundane life, a cat being sick on the carpet, a successful job interview, all sent to this silent device. Interspersed were replies from William's hidden phone. They were brief, cautious, but undeniably tender. I'm glad the interview went well. You deserve this. That sounds tough. Try to get some rest. I wish I could be there. A wave of nausea washed over Kate. She dropped the phone onto the desk as if it were red hot. Her perfect, quiet life suddenly felt like a stage set, a carefully constructed illusion. The distracted looks, the sleeping in the study, and the weight he seemed to be carrying, it all snapped into focus. It wasn't a big project at work. It was this. It was Jay. She stumbled back from the desk, her mind reeling. Who was Jay? A colleague? An old flame? Someone from his past? The questions clawed at her, sharp and insistent. She looked at the phone lying there on the scattered papers, a black monolith in the middle of their ordinary life. It held a secret, a whole other world that her husband inhabited, a world she knew nothing about. The first wave of shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard feeling she didn't recognize. It wasn't just sadness. It was a profound sense of betrayal, of being made a fool. She had been so busy noticing the small, inconsequential details of life that she had missed the gaping chasm opening up at her feet. So Kate walked out of the study and closed the door behind her. She didn't cry. She was too numb for that. She simply sat on the sofa in the living room, her hands folded in her lap, and stared at the wall. She watched the shadows of the rainy afternoon lengthen across the carpet, waiting for the sound of his key in the lock. She had found his secret. Now she had to decide what to do with it. The sound of the front door opening was like a gunshot in the silent house. Kate didn't move from the sofa. She heard William's familiar routine, the soft thud of his bag on the floor, the jingle of his keys as he placed them in the ceramic bowl on the hall table, the slight creak of the coat closet door. "Kate? I'm home!" he called out, his voice carrying the weary edge it always had these days. "In here," she replied. But her voice sounded strange to her own ears, flat and distant. He appeared in the living room doorway, shrugging off his damp jacket. He offered her a tired smile. "Rotten day. The client on the Harborside project changed the spec again. It's going to throw the whole timeline off." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd seen 1,000 times. It looked different to her now. Everything looked different. He paused, his eyes finally registering her stillness, her posture. "You all right?" he asked, the question automatic, the way it always was. Kate looked at him, really looked. She saw the man she married, the father they never had, the steady rock in her life. And she saw a stranger, a man with a secret life contained in a cheap phone hidden in his desk. "There's something you need to explain," she said, her voice quiet but firm. She gestured to the coffee table. She had placed the phone there, its dark screen facing up, a silent accusation. William's gaze followed her gesture. For a moment, he just stared at the phone. Then the color drained from his face so completely that he looked like a wax figure. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He was left utterly speechless. The silence that followed was a living thing, thick and suffocating. Kate watched the emotions play across his face: shock, fear, guilt, a silent movie of a man caught. He didn't try to deny it. He didn't ask how she found it. He just stood there, frozen, his eyes locked on the object that held his secret. "I was clearing out the study," Kate continued, her tone unnervingly calm. It was the calm of deep water, hiding treacherous currents beneath. "I found it in your desk. It isn't password protected. I read some of the messages, William. From Jay." At the mention of the letter, he flinched. He finally looked at her, and the raw guilt in his eyes was worse than any lie he could have told. He looked broken, a man stripped bare. "Kate," he whispered, his voice cracking. It's not what you think." Kate let out a sound that was half a laugh, half a sob. "It's not what I think? William, there's a phone hidden in your desk. A woman is sending you messages saying she's thinking of you, and you're replying telling her you wish you could be with her. What exactly am I supposed to think?" He took a step into the room, his hand outstretched, a plea for understanding. "I know how it looks. I know, but you have to let me explain." "Then explain," Kate said, or her voice finally gaining an edge. "I'm listening. Tell me who Jay is." William sank into the armchair opposite her, looking older and more tired than she had ever seen him. He buried his face in his hands for a long moment, and when he looked up, his eyes were glistening. "Her name is Jess," he began, the words coming out slowly, painfully. She's my sister." Of all the things Kate had prepared herself for, an affair, a secret gambling debt, a plan to leave her, this was not on the list. She blinked, utterly confused. "Your sister?" she repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. "William, you're an only child. You told me your parents couldn't have any more kids after you. You don't have a sister." "I know that's what I told you," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "It's what I told everyone. It's what I was told." He took a shaky breath. "A few months ago, I got a letter. It was from a woman named Jess. She said she was my half-sister, that she'd been trying to find me for years." He paused, letting the information land. "My father, he had an affair, before he met my mum. A brief thing, apparently. He never knew about it. Jess's mother never told him she was pregnant. She got married to someone else when Jess was little, and Jess took that name. She only found out the truth a couple of years ago when her own mum got sick. She started digging, trying to find her biological father, but she was too late. He died 15 years ago, so she started looking for me." Kate listened, her initial shock giving way to a dawning, more complex confusion. "But why the secrecy?" she asked. "Why the hidden phone? Why not just tell me?" William, I've discovered I have a sister. That's a thing people share with their wives." He shook his head, his expression agonized. "Because of Mum," he said quietly. "You know what she's like. She's fragile. Her whole world is the past, the story of our little family. If she found out that Dad had this whole other life, a child he never knew about, it would shatter her. She's built their entire marriage on this idealized version of him, of them. I couldn't do that to her. I've been protecting her my whole life. I didn't know how to stop." Kate felt the puzzle pieces starting to shift, forming a new, more complicated picture. William's mother, Patricia, was a sweet but deeply anxious woman who lived in a perpetual state of nostalgia. She worshipped the memory of her late husband, and any deviation from the family myth was treated as a personal betrayal. It was exhausting, and Kate had often gently encouraged William to set firmer boundaries. She could see the impossible position he was in. "And the phone?" Kate asked, her voice softer now, but still searching. "I couldn't risk using my own phone," he explained. "What if Mum saw a notification? What if she picked it up by accident? It seemed safer. I bought that phone with cash just for talking to Jess." I was going to tell you, Kate. I swear I was. I was just trying to figure out how. I was trying to figure out everything. This isn't just a new person in my life. It's a whole new reality. It's a sister. I have a sister. And I've been trying to get to know her, to be there for her, all while carrying this secret and trying to figure out what it means for Mum, for us. He looked at her, his eyes pleading for understanding. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. I was a coward. I was scared. Scared of how you'd react, scared of how it would change things. I didn't know how to explain something I barely understood myself. Kate sat back, the adrenaline of confrontation slowly seeping away, leaving a profound weariness in its wake. The anger was still there, a low, simmering ember. He had lied, by omission if not by outright deceit. He had shut her out, dealing with a monumental life event alone and leaving her to stumble around in the dark, fearing the worst. That hurt. That was a wound that would take time to heal. But the story was so far from what she had imagined. It wasn't another woman. It was a sister. The betrayal was one of secrecy and mistrust, not infidelity. It was a different kind of pain, but perhaps, she thought, a mendable one. She looked at the phone on the table. So all those messages, she said slowly, the thinking of you, the wish I could be there, that's just a brother getting to know his sister? William nodded, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. She's had a hard life. Her adoptive dad wasn't kind. She just wanted to find her people. She just wanted a family that wanted her back. I'm her people, Kate. I'm all she has left of her real father. His voice broke. I couldn't turn my back on her. But I didn't know how to bring her into our lives without destroying everything. Kate looked at the phone, then at her husband, this man she thought she knew, who was proving to be so much more complicated. The silence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't the heavy silence of accusation and guilt. It was the tentative, fragile silence of two people standing at the edge of a new, unexpected landscape, unsure of the first step. Later that night, after the raw edges of the conversation had been smoothed by the simple act of Kate making them both a cup of tea, they sat at the kitchen table. The hidden phone was still on the coffee table in the living room, as if they were both afraid to touch it, this strange artifact that had detonated their lives. So, what's she like? Kate asked. It was the first normal question she had posed in hours. Jess. William looked up, a flicker of surprise in his tired eyes, followed by a tentative, hopeful light. She's funny, he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Really funny. She has this dry, sarcastic sense of humor. She sends me memes. Can you imagine? I have a sister who sends me memes. He shook his head in wonder. She's a primary school teacher in Manchester. She loves her job, says the kids keep her sane. She has a cat called Admiral Waffles. Despite everything, Kate felt a tiny smile tug at her own mouth. Admiral Waffles? It's a ridiculous name, William agreed, the smile becoming a little more real. She's so easy to talk to. It's strange. We've only been messaging for a few months, but it feels like I've known her forever. There's this instant connection. We both make the same stupid jokes. We both hate mushrooms with a passion. We both have this habit of tapping our fingers when we're thinking. Little things that my dad used to do. His voice thickened again. She's part of me, Kate. A part I never knew was missing. Kate reached across the table and took his hand. It was a small gesture, but it was a bridge. I'm sorry you had to carry this alone, she said quietly. I'm sorry you felt you couldn't tell me. I was so scared, he admitted, his fingers tightening around hers. Scared of the fallout. Scared of how my mum would react. Scared that if I told you, you'd see me differently, that our life would become all about this drama. I just wanted to protect everyone, and in the end, I just made a mess of it. Kate nodded, understanding dawning. His instinct to protect, the very thing she loved about him, was the very thing that had caused the rupture. "So what now?" she asked. William took a deep breath. "I want you to meet her," he said. It was a statement, but his eyes asked it as a question. I know it's a lot to ask, but she's coming to Bristol next weekend. She's been too scared to come before in case I changed my mind. But I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want secrets. I want my two worlds to meet." The idea was terrifying. To sit across from this woman who had, inadvertently, turned her life upside down. To see the face of the secret that had nearly broken them. But as Kate looked at her husband, at the hope and fear mingled in his expression, she knew there was only one answer she could give. "Okay," she said. "I'll meet her." The following Saturday arrived with a crisp, autumnal chill. Kate spent the morning in a state of nervous energy, cleaning the house for the third time, rearranging flowers, and changing her outfit twice. Like she was meeting a woman who was simultaneously her sister-in-law and a complete stranger, a woman who represented both her husband's deepest secret and his greatest joy. It was an impossible situation, and she had no idea how to navigate it. William was just as bad. He hovered, straightening cushions she'd already straightened, checking his phone every 30 seconds. When the doorbell finally rang, they both froze, looking at each other like deer in headlights. William went to answer it. Kate heard the door open, a murmur of voices, and then he was leading a woman into the living room. Jess was shorter than Kate had imagined, with the same dark hair as William, but where his eyes were a steady gray, hers were a warm, startling blue. She clutched a bottle of wine like a talisman, and her smile was wide and nervous. "Hi," she said, her voice soft. "You must be Kate. I'm Jess. I'm so sorry for all of this. The drama, I mean. The secret phone. It's like something out of a terrible soap opera." Despite the tension, Kate let out a small laugh. The self-deprecating humor, so like William's, immediately put her at ease. "It's certainly been a memorable week," Kate agreed, stepping forward. "Come in, please." The first few minutes were stilted, full of polite offers of tea and coffee and nervous glances. But as they sat down, the initial awkwardness began to thaw. Jess talked about her journey from Manchester, about her class of unruly 7-year-olds, about the utter chaos of trying to adopt a kitten who had immediately declared himself the ruler of her flat. As she spoke, gesturing with her hands, Kate saw the mannerisms William had described. And the way she tilted her head when she laughed, the finger tapping when she paused to think. It was William who finally broached the subject that hung in the air between them. "Jess, tell Kate about your mum. Tell her how you found out." Jess's smile faded, replaced by a more thoughtful expression. She looked at Kate, her blue eyes honest and open. "My mum, she was never a great secret keeper. I think the guilt ate away at her. When she got sick, she made me promise to find my biological father's family. She gave me a name and an old faded photograph. That's all I had." She paused, taking a sip of her tea. "By the time I traced him, he was already gone. It was like hitting a brick wall. But then I found a mention of his son, William, in an old obituary. It took me another year to find you. To find him." She looked at William, her eyes shining. "I almost didn't send that first letter. I thought, what if he doesn't want to know? What if he thinks I'm a fraud, or just trouble? I've got a whole folder of unsent letters." "I'm glad you sent that one," William said quietly. Kate felt her heart crack open, just a little. She saw Jess not as a threat, but as a woman, alone in the world, who had bravely reached out to grasp a chance at family. She saw the same vulnerability in her that she saw in William, the same quiet strength. "Tell me about your mum," Kate asked gently. "The one who raised you." Jess's story unfolded over the next hour. It was a story of a loving but complicated childhood, of a stepfather who made it clear she wasn't his, and of a mother who tried to compensate with double the love. It was a story of always feeling slightly on the outside, of never quite belonging. It was, Kate realized, the story of someone searching for their place in the world. As the afternoon wore on, the conversation drifted from the heavy to the light. They talked about favorite books, terrible holiday experiences, and the correct way to make a cup of tea, a surprisingly contentious topic. Kate found herself genuinely liking Jess. She was warm, intelligent, and possessed a resilience that was both admirable and heartbreaking. Later, as Jess was getting ready to leave, promising to meet them for lunch the next day, she paused at the door. She turned to Kate, her eyes sincere. "Thank you," she said, "for today, for not hating me on sight. William told me how you found the phone, and I felt terrible. I felt like I'd blown up your life." Kate glanced at William, who was watching them both with an expression of naked hope. She looked back at Jess. "You didn't blow up our life," she said, realizing it was true as she spoke the words. "You just revealed a crack in its foundation. Now we get to rebuild it, stronger than before, and that includes a room for you if you want it." Jess's eyes welled with tears, and she pulled Kate into a sudden, fierce hug. Over her shoulder, Kate caught William's eye. He was smiling, a real, unburdened smile that she hadn't seen in months. In that embrace, the last vestiges of her anger and hurt dissolved, replaced by something new, the beginning of an expanded family. A few weeks after that first meeting, the three of them sat in a quiet cafe near the university. The initial, intense emotions had settled into something more comfortable. Jess had visited twice more, and they had fallen into an easy rhythm of Sunday roasts and evening phone calls. But today felt different. Today, they had a mission. William placed a large brown envelope on the table. It was old and worn, the corners soft with age. He slid a photograph out of it and laid it in front of Jess. It was a black and white picture of a young man with William's steady gray eyes, laughing at something just out of frame. He had a carefree look, a stark contrast to the serious father William had described. "This is him," William said softly. "Our dad. Before he got old, before he got sick. This is how I like to remember him." He pushed the photo towards her. "I want you to have it." Jess picked up the photograph with trembling fingers. She stared at it for a long time, tracing the outline of his face. Kate watched a tear slip down her cheek, but she was smiling. "He has your smile," she whispered to William. "And his eyes. I have his eyes." "No," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have his spirit. Mum always said he was a terror, always joking, always getting into mischief. That's you, Jess. That's all you." From the envelope, William produced a few more treasures, an old school report that praised the young man's lively imagination, a ticket stub from a long-gone cinema, and a simple signet ring. He slid the ring across the table. "This was his. Mum gave it to me when I was 18. I think he'd want you to have it. A part of him. To go with the part of him that's in you." Jess looked at the ring, then at William, then at Kate, who was watching the scene with tears streaming unashamedly down her own face. This was the message. Not the one on the hidden phone, but this. A message of belonging, of acceptance, of family, delivered not through a screen, but through the tangible, precious remnants of a shared past. For Kate, the entire tumultuous journey suddenly made sense. The shock of the discovery, the pain of the perceived betrayal, the confusion, and finally, the acceptance. It had all been leading to this moment. She had stumbled upon a secret meant for someone else, and in doing so, she had unlocked a door for her husband and for herself. They had not just survived a crisis, they had gained a sister. As Jess slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, Kate reached across the table and placed her hand over theirs. The three of them sat there, a small new family, joined not by blood alone, but by choice, by courage, and by a message that was never meant for her eyes, but which had ultimately led them all home.